Welcome to Heart of the Wild, the podcast where we explore the wonders of wildlife, the beauty of animal behavior, and the people devoting to protecting our planet's most extraordinary creatures. Today, we are very excited about speaking through the evolving landscape of animal conservation and technology. We cannot deny that there is so much conversation happening around AI. You can't walk out the door without hearing about what's going on in AI. Certainly a great deal of fear around AI as well, but there's a lot of potential positive outcomes that we can see from it. What we really wanted to talk about today is really exciting advances, potentially, in what's going on with AI and animal conservation and animal communication. Things like, can I actually potentially talk to my dog one day? And can animals be helped and assisted in some of these advances that we have in technology and AI? And who better can we speak with about this than our wonderful guest today, Dominic Dyer. Dominic is a wildlife protection campaigner. He is a writer and a broadcaster, and he spent 16 years working in various government sectors in Whitehall and Brussels, focused on issues ranging from marine environment protection to organic agriculture. Dominic has also written a book about the complexities of badger culling, and he's now the chief executive of the Badger Trust. So with all that said, hello, Dominic.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm actually no longer chief executive. I've been chief executive, but I stepped down a number of years ago. So I have all that experience of being Badger Trust. I now work with various other charities on policy work and advisory work, including the Born Free Foundation. But badgers are very close to my heart, and I'm still working on badgers. So that period of time I worked at the chief executive level, I'm still very much involved in that debate.
Okay, well, thank you very much for clarifying that. And thank you for all the work that you have done throughout your career in helping animals and helping the environment. And you are certainly the person to talk to about some of these evolving technologies that we have. So
thank you.
I'm going to jump right in to talk about what we're talking about here. So we've spoken at length before, you and I, about the rise in the use of AI, the potential benefits of AI, and even some of the potential dangers. What I want to ask you is, how close are we to actually talking to our animals with the use of this technology?
Probably closer than many of us think, really. I think, AI obviously is capturing the imagination of governments. It's a huge area of investment and technology, and it is causing concern about changes to our working practices and everything else. But on the other side of it, it's opening up a new dimension in interspecies communication. We potentially are getting close to be able to communicate with intelligent animal species we share this planet with. The main reason why we're getting to that point is because the technology is moving so quickly that we can actually start to really take in all of this huge amount of data we have, which has been, put through field research and activities that conservationists have been undertaking for decades, with huge amounts of imaging, huge amounts of audio material, looking at the behavior of animals, looking at how they move, how they migrate, how they communicate. And then suddenly we can put all this technology to work looking for patterns within these communications, so that actually we can really maybe break down how animals are using sounds, are using behavioral changes, colors, different ways where they communicate or move through the ecosystems they live in, to understand actually how they're communicating. And this is happening really quickly. So as the communication data starts to be assessed, and as we can put all these electronic digital tools to work, we suddenly could open a whole new box of communication with animals that have been on this planet far longer than we have. Also, of course, with some of our companion animals, dogs, which we've had, living by our sides through most of human evolution. So it is quite an interesting and fascinating area that's beginning to really wake people up to what the potential might be.
That's incredible. And that's huge. I love the way that you describe it in terms of how animals do communicate. So do you see it as, I guess, the first iteration, potentially, say? Do you see it as actually speaking to your animals, or is it more in the communication that they are giving to us in that case?
We have, in a way, communicated with animals using sign language. We communicate with our dogs, every day. They understand certain communications. You will give them certain visual signals.
Yep.
And, grey parrots can communicate in a way of just, replicating the way we speak, and then actually, audibly making noises that sound very familiar to us in relation to our language. Mm-hmm. And with some of the grey apes, there's been some amazing research done where, there's been various hand communication signals to actually begin to have a dialogue, a means of communicating. But this is going right further into how animals interact. And this is really opening up a completely new door. In some areas, we have huge amounts of data. So we looked at sort of whales and dolphins because of the way they communicate under vast distances in water. Hydrophones have been in areas of the ocean for years recording all of this data, as well as lots of visual data, lots of film that's been taken, lots of still photographs that have been taken, so huge amounts of information out there. And because of the use of digital cameras, remember, all this is getting smaller as well. So in most remote parts of the world now, 24/7, we have digital recording devices recording sound and imaging in some of the most remote locations of the world, which we've never had before. So all of this data is coming back. So how do we start to really go through this and use all the technological AI tools we have to begin to open it up? And I think that's where this change is coming, and it's coming very quickly. Whales particularly, we have some amazing data, and that's where a lot of good work is being done, but there's been work being done on bats. There's been work being done, of course, on our companion animals, a lot of interest in what we do with our dogs and how we communicate there as well. But at some point, we are going to make a breakthrough. But there are a lot of ethical issues that then come up, about animal sentience, about animal rights, about animal exploitation and cruelty. Will this improve the situation with regards to animals? We hope it will, but potentially could it make it worse and lead to more exploitation and cruelty? There's a danger of that as well.
I want to get in a little bit more to which animal species have the most promising future for some of this technology. You just talked about whales, you talked about companion animals, you talked about bats. Is there any particular species that you see being the most promising in terms of responding to some of this technology? And I guess why would that be? Is that because they have some of the most similar communication patterns to us, or we've already been able to kind of unpack some of their communication strategies now? What does that look like?
Well, there's some of the marine mammals, most definitely, because what we find is we've got huge amounts of data, but it shows different audio signals coming back from these animals. They are using different sounds to communicate. And the more that we've done research on this, marine biologists looking at this in particular, the more that they've actually found that this noise they're making could be alerting them to a potential danger. This could be a mother and calf communication going on. This could be a joyous activity as a pod that they're enjoying, doing. So this could be a hunting pack. But there are lots of different communications that we begin to see. So this is not just like 5 or 10 different sounds that we might be getting from one species. There can be hundreds of different complex sounds that we're beginning to record. The question is, how do we sort of break that down into a communication method? It's a bit like, I don't know if you remember the film, Brief Encounters of the Third Kind, the Steven Spielberg film, where you're using sound to communicate with the aliens when they come down onto the volcano. Yes. But there is an element of that. That film was based around the fact that there was a means by which they were communicating, and those sounds were distinct, and then the alien species could respond in that way. So I think we are at a stage where we could do that with the marine mammals in particular, because they have such complex means of communication, because they communicate over such vast distances, and we have so much data. But other species, honeybees, for example, because we have a lot of studying of honeybees. Honeybees are so vital to everything, all the food we eat, all the pollination processes on this planet. Without honeybees, we'd be in really serious trouble in terms of producing enough food to feed ourselves. And there are diseases and problems of honeybees, varroa mite, and there have been lots of problems around the world with honeybee collapse. So there's more and more research looking at their behavior and how they move and how they interact and how they make noises, and the visual side of things and the navigation side of things. All of this, again, is showing us, even in the insect world, there is quite, an interesting area of communication. And this is something else that, we can look at. Bats, I said earlier on, there's a lot of research going on with fruit bats and other species of bats looking at how they communicate. And how, again, we can learn from what they're doing, both visually, because if you look at the way the researchers are working in this field, they're using, obviously, a lot of video material, but also sound. So you're looking at how an animal displays, how an animal reacts, but also the noises they make. And that, again, tells us an awful lot about what they're doing. So can we break this communication process? Can we begin to really open up this door? I think we can. But, it's a complex area of science, but we're getting closer to it.
It's exciting. For animal lovers like us, it's exciting. As you said before, there are some potential concerns, right? Because there are people in the world that don't have the best interests at heart for anyone, humans, animals, etc. I am curious, as we kind of go into a little bit more of the ethics, what do you see for the future of animal conservation as we unpack some of these new technologies? And then I want to talk a little bit more about the ethics behind that.
I think we're at a crisis point with the natural world. I went to a briefing in London last week, an emergency briefing as it was called, about what we were seeing in Britain and around the world in terms of climate change, but also nature, the impact it was having on the natural world. So this direct link between the changing climate and biodiversity, wildlife. And wherever you look, the indicators are on red. Human evolution has reached such a point that we're doing amazing things with science and technology, but also we're doing inherent damage to this delicate, irreplaceable ecosystem that we call planet Earth. So I think if anything comes of the use of technology, it has to be that we understand better the species on this planet that we have to protect for the future, their habitats, their behavior, in a way that it doesn't lead to more exploitation and destruction. It leads to protection and understanding and care and compassion. But there are some real difficult, complex issues here. So if you, for instance, begin to break the communication between mammals and humans, that could include pigs, which are an intelligent species that we kill in their tens of millions for food production. So if we are communicating with those animals and we understand how they have fear, how they have joy, how they have sentience in all the feelings that we have, could we ethically slaughter them in the way that we are now? I personally think that would be a very difficult ethical bridge for us to cross, and it wouldn't be a bad situation if we had to make that decision. So in some ways, opening up this ability to communicate and understand these animals could lead us to change our relationship with them. And when it comes to industrial agriculture, we know there's an awful lot of environmental problems, animal welfare problems associated with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I don't think you can, once you break the communication barrier of one species, you can't just sort of keep it in a box and say that we're only going to talk to our dogs and we're not going to talk to pigs. We don't want to have any contact with cows or other animals that we farm.
I think that's such a good point. I know we've outside of this talked about, and this is a totally separate topic that maybe we can explore another time, but just being a vegan and eating meat and that sort of ethical. I think a lot of our listeners probably feel this way. I feel this way, and I'm not a vegan. I've tried. And it was difficult for a number of reasons, health reasons, et cetera. But I feel guilty every single time I eat meat. I just do. And I'm not telling anyone to feel this way, but I do personally feel this way myself. And I think having communication channels open up would only multiply that times 10,000.
I think the sort of the young audience, this podcast reaches out to today, if they were eating a bit of pork without thinking about it and suddenly they saw a program on television where there was a communication with a pig who was telling you how it felt about things, it probably would make a significant change in what they chose to do individually. I also think it would give a massive boost to cell-based meat production, which I think we just need to invest in. This is where we can produce meat, which replicates the animal's body without killing the animal. And I think the technology is there, but it needs huge investment to make it, in a way that we can afford to consume it and produce it. But, that's to me is the future of animal agriculture. And if interspecies communication pushes forward cell-based meat production, I think that would be a good thing.
And think about, too, some of the legislation that's being passed. There's legislation in Spain that was just passed. There's, I think, state-based legislation in Pennsylvania in the U.S., where dogs are being considered family versus property. And that, too, similarly, will only push that forward in terms of communication with pets, with companion animals, as you said.
And, our relationship with animals, particularly dogs, and to a degree cats as well, because both have lived by our side for tens of thousands of years of human evolution, is very complex. The emotions, the feelings we have, the feelings of joy we have from having those relationships, the grief we have when we lose animals that we've had long relationships with, which is every bit as terrible in many ways as human loss and human grief. And I think we're only beginning to really understand that. But, dogs evolve around us. They know our feelings. They can really pick up on the way we feel every day when we get up and what's going on in our lives. But if we could communicate with them, we might learn so much more about this relationship, which could assist us. They do amazing things already. Where I live in Milton Keynes, there's a medical detection charity where dogs are sniffing out cancers, which are doing incredible work because their noses are so powerful. So when they're able to replicate this with, electronic noses based upon what the dog's been able to do, we will save millions of people's lives. Because we know dogs can sniff out cancer. So we just need to be able to take what they're able to do and to turn it into an electronic means of doing this. And this would be an amazing step forward for medical health. So that alone they're helping us with. But we know every day, from guide dogs to dogs that assist people who have fits and other problems in daily life, to all the rescue dogs that go into earthquakes and do other things that are incredible. They are amazing. But then we're also very cruel to them. We have a dog meat trade. We still test on many dogs in laboratories, that we breed them for that purpose. So I'd hope, again, if we did break down that communication barrier, we'd also learn not to exploit and to be horrible to these incredible animals.
I really like look, we are animal lovers, obviously, and I really like the thought of using this technology for good. I know we often here in general on the podcast talk about the positive element. Obviously, there are really negative sides to animal ethics and the way that humans interact with animals. In general, people that are listening, I really do hope and believe that they're all good people that love animals, that care about animals, that care about animal welfare. And my hope is that the technology will largely be used for some of these positive benefits that you're talking about. I love the thought of what you're saying, where it can continue to foster some of the positive attributes of what animals can provide as well, in terms of rescue assistance, medical assistance, all of these fantastic things that animals do to enhance our lives beyond emotional support and mental health support and all those other things. Do you see any other enhancements that animals can continue to provide with the continued assistance and use of technology and AI? Anything further that can be bolstered from that perspective?
I think, we've got to learn about our place on this planet. We're the dominant species, but because we're so dominant, we've actually exploited and destroyed a great deal of what we rely upon to survive. What I'd hope is if we broke the communication barrier with the great whales, for example, which in the 1960s and 70s, when I was born, by 1970, when I was born, we'd hunted them to the verge of extinction through industrial whaling. It was only in the 80s and through campaigning and into the 90s that we began to get those global protection elements in place to stop commercial whaling to a large degree. What would they tell us? Because they have memories. This idea that only humans have memories. These complex animals pass those memories down from pod to pod. So they would have memories of the great hunts. They'd have memories of the cruelty that they would have seen us put them through. And that cruelty is not over. I was in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago speaking about the need to stop the killing of whales and dolphins in the Faroe Islands, which has been going on for generations, a so-called cultural hunt that goes on today for no reason other than the fact that a small number of people on the islands believe it's their right to do this, to drive in large numbers of pilot whales and dolphins, thousands every year, and butcher them in the most horrible way on the coastline.
It makes me physically sick to hear about it.
There are lots of ways by which we're trying to stop that, looking at trade relationships and trying to make people on the islands think about their future and all the rest of it. But if we broke the communication species of those pilot whales and dolphins, and if people really understood what they went through, looking at what they were doing, because they're killing whole families in front of each other, I think that could be a game changer. So this is why I think it's so important. Because I think it would make it all but impossible for anyone to carry out such a barbaric, cruel act when they understand what that's actually doing to the animals and how they're communicating that fear.
Ultimately, it humanizes the animal further.
Yes, it does to a degree, but it also makes us more responsible for our relationships with the natural world. Mm-hmm. Because, most of the people doing this research, there's people, I had a call a week ago with Jeremy Collar, who's an amazing financier who, is putting a lot of money, a wealthy billionaire putting a lot of money into this research. And he's got the Jeremy Collar Doolittle Prize that he's put over $10 million into for someone to break the interspecies communication side of things. But he's doing it for the right reasons. He has put a huge amount of money into trying to find alternatives to meat, vegetable proteins, bringing companies and investments, hundreds of millions of dollars into that area. Because he, came to a moment in his life 20 years ago where he thought, actually, I'm making a lot of money, but what's happening in the world? What can I make a difference with? So I have confidence that the people that are pursuing this are doing it for the right reasons. There's always a danger it could lead to exploitation. But I think it's also something that would allow us to open up a world which would make us think about the relationship we have with each other and the animals we share this planet with. And it could be a defining moment for humans, just like the moon landing in 1969 when we had those first images of Earth from space, which made a whole generation think about how delicate this planet was and why we needed to stand up and protect it, which is where the environment movement I work in today came from. As Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, it all came from there, that moon landing. I think this is going to be as bigger than the moon landing if we can do it.
That's huge. And it really is how people compare this technological shift in so many ways. The moon landing, the change with the internet coming into play, like so many gigantic, those are two very different things, but just so many gigantic shifts in culture and life. Obviously, this is going to be another massive shift for all of us. I know we've been talking a lot about AI-based technologies. I wonder if there are any other technologies that you have seen, such as GPS monitoring, drones, things like that have been beneficial to the animal world and have, drastically helped in conservation efforts.
Yeah, and I think this is all going hand in hand, to be quite honest. So, we talked about the fact that you've got more, cameras and digitalization tools that allow us to put recording devices in parts of the world we could never have put before, 24/7 recording, so we can get all that data back. We've got drones now that can take, cameras into areas that we could never get access to before without causing huge damage to those delicate ecosystems. And I think that's crucially important. And we're combining that with AI technology. So we're trying to traffic up wildlife crime. I spoke at a conference in London recently in the city about the scale of wildlife crime, which is the third biggest criminal activity. You've got sex trafficking, you've got gun running, you've got drugs, and you've got wildlife crime. It's worth billions globally. People trading in endangered species. There's the CITES summit going on as we talk, which comes together every 2 years, bringing people together to look at how we do control trade in endangered species at the moment. But there's an awful lot of rare endangered species, pangolins, rhino horn, elephant tusks, rare endangered big cats like cheetahs and jaguars and other species that are being killed for their pelts. And we've got to be able to stop that. And because of the complexity of the online world we live in, it's easier for people in the dark parts of the internet to trade in all these things and to use various means, blockchain technology and other ways of actually paying for this. So we're harnessing technology, AI technology, that we can use to look at where these products are being traded, how people are using various means of electronic movement of funds to cover their activities. How do we engage with the banks and financial organizations to assist us so we can track it down, we can stop it at source? That, I think, is really, really important. We've also got a lot more work going on just trying to think about how we oversee habitats and how we understand what's happening. If we talk about climate change, it's happening every day, but it's having a massive changing impact on wildlife habitats. We've got invasive species that we brought in, going into areas and causing havoc. If you look at Australia and other parts of the world, major problems with that. We have forest fires and floods that cause huge devastation. Then how does animals and wildlife recover from that? So having all of this data in the field, using AI technology, using drones, using cameras, using all the digital tools we have, is helping us to understand better, and also helping us to try and deal with the worst aspects of illegal criminal activity too. So I am optimistic that actually these tools are already being put to good use day in, day out, and there's so much more we can do as well.
That sounds promising. Obviously, as we talked about before, there are some negative sides to this that could potentially come out, but that brings me joy. That brings me hope to know that there are lots of developments that could come to fruition. I want to know from your perspective, how readily available and accessible are these things to, I think about, some of these less developed countries, Africa. I've talked to a lot of people from South Africa, for example. They're doing so much work in like pangolin projects and issues with poaching rhinos and elephant concerns and things like that. So I wonder if that is something that would be readily available, or when that might be readily available at sort of like a broader scale.
I think to a large degree it is already. So if you looked at what WWF is doing, or I4, well-known, recognized animal welfare, wildlife protection organizations that work in the developed world, they're already deploying these tools. So when you're giving money to these NGOs, charities, they are investing in technology, and then they're working in developing countries and how they can apply it. Born Free, one of the charities I work with, does amazing work in Africa, looking at human-wildlife conflict, how we can avoid problems between big cats or elephants getting into areas where people are farming or their livelihoods are under threat, and, building fences and barriers and cameras and drones and technology. So all of that applies. And I think you'll find that more and more organizations are moving into this territory. It can increase their opportunities to do more with less people on the ground. It can improve the way they work with government agencies and international police like Interpol and things on wildlife trafficking, or say like we work with the Kenyan Wildlife Service with Born Free in Africa and all the work we do on anti-poaching there. So I think already it's being deployed. The question is, where does it go next? How expensive is it? Do governments have a role in this? My worry at the moment would be that governments are cutting back on a lot of their foreign aid budgets. Like the UK's halved its foreign aid budget to try and pay for more defence spending with Ukraine and things. My view would be what we need to do is more targeted, clever use of overseas aid budgets, working with international NGOs, government agencies where we can deploy technology to really protect biodiversity and wildlife or tackle wildlife crime. I think that's good use of public money for the UK or Germany, France, the United States to work in these countries. So I think it's a combination between what NGOs can do raising funds, what governments can assist, because we definitely need to do it. But the technology gives us that edge.
Okay. That is great insight. We are almost at time, but I want to do my favorite segment, and I'm going to try and stump Dominic, who is such a seasoned professional and expert in animals in England and the UK. So we're going to do a little bit of a different type of animal today than I think some of our listeners have heard in the past. But we're going to see if Dominic can guess an animal sound in our final segment of each episode. But before that, Dominic, I just want to ask you what you are most looking forward to, most excited about in terms of promising technologies that you see on the horizon to help in terms of animal conservation, animal ethics coming down the line.
I think, to me at the moment, one of the things I'm working on, you're going to speak with, my colleague I've been working with, Abby Senior, as part of this podcast as well, is working with people in the technology field, particularly a younger generation than I am. I'm of a certain age, but and trying to get them to think about what I've learned as a conservationist wildlife advocate about how we can use technology more cleverly. And what I'm excited by is how do we bring that next generation of entrepreneurs together to say, I want to do this. So, I came away from that emergency briefing last week in London, like most people going, oh my God, this is terrible. The world's going to fall on my head. But on the other side, I think actually, no, there are things we can do. We might not be able to stop the worst of what's coming, but you know what? We can adapt. We can learn. Humans are brilliant at that. We need a technological revolution every bit as life-changing as the Industrial Revolution, which, changed all our lives for the better. Mm-hmm. But we need to do it in a way that actually works in harmony with planet Earth. Because the Industrial Revolution led to massive exploitation of the world's resources, and we pushed it to the very edge of what we can do. Now we've got to come back from the edge, continue for mankind to evolve, learn to live in harmony with the natural world rather than destroy it, and learn from it. Because I think we can learn so much. And that's what I'm excited by, where that bridge of technology will take us, and how younger people who feel increasingly desperate about the future of the world will wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I want to be a tech company entrepreneur, but I don't just want to generate profits for a corporation. I want to start a business that's going to, make us communicate with animals or fight wildlife crime or, protect against some of the worst aspects of climate change in the developing world. I want to protect the future of animals and nature. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. And there are people out there that are definitely wanting to do that. And I want to be able to help in any way I can.
That's so inspiring. I really hope that everyone out there listening is incredibly inspired by what Dominic just said. I would venture to say that there are quite a lot of listeners that are listening right now that maybe you are in a role right now or are thinking about venturing into the working world, or you are thinking about venturing into some kind of wildlife-focused volunteer work. Personally, the whole reason I started this podcast was because of my absolute love and adoration for animals. I've always volunteered with animals, and what you just said right there, my sort of desperation for what I was seeing around me, and working at many tech companies in the past, some that had more, I guess, implicit sustainability practices than others, was what drove me to do this very thing, and was what allowed me to meet you and have this incredible conversation.
So thank you, because there is a huge gap for this debate and discussion. Spotify is an amazing platform, all the work you're doing. So thank you. Keep it up, because you're going to get a bigger audience and excite more people. Someone's going to listen to your program and they're going to do amazing things in the future. It could help save the future of mankind. I'm sure of it. They'll be sitting there now going, you know what? I listened to that podcast. I'm going to become the next sort of Bill Gates, but I'm going to, do something that's going to change fundamentally our relationship with the natural world. That would be fantastic.
That would be a dream. And hearing your words truly is so inspiring. So thank you so much for being here. All right. That said, we're going to try and stump Dominic with our animal noise. So here we go. Are you ready?
Is it a mammal?
Yes.
It's a mammal. Okay. Dormouse?
No. Close though. Actually, that's such a good guess. It's not. As I sit here, I'm thinking, how many clues? It's a similar animal to the work that you have done and that you wrote about.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to...
Also, I'm questioning if I'm right about it being a mammal. I'm almost positive.
It's a mustelid then. It's a part of the sort of badger group of species. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think.
I'm going to immediately get off of this microphone and Google if this is a mammal.
A weasel?
No,
Okay.
That's also close.
Right. Go on. You'll have to tell me. I won't keep guessing because I think otherwise...
It's an otter.
It's an otter. Okay, well, I wasn't too far off.
No, you were very close.
No, okay.
That was a great guess.
Thank you. All right, but it's a beautiful sound. There you go. Beautiful animals as well. And obviously you see more of them in our country than ever before now, which is great. That is a success story.
I thought that you would like that.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your work in helping all these beautiful animals. And thank you, Dominic, so much for being here, for your beautiful words, for your insights on the future of animal conservation, on animal communication. I am very excited. I know we are also here to help in the ethics of what this means for the future, but I'm very excited about what this means for the ways in which we're going to be engaging with our companion animals, with our marine animals, and the wildlife world at large. So thank you very much for being here. And everyone listening, as we always say here, let the heart of the wild inspire not just awe, but action. And we will see you very soon.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.